Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Wire App. I'm Jahnavi Sen. Earlier this week, there was a political surprise when Jagdeep Dhankhar resigned from his post as Vice President. Meanwhile, the Bombay High Court has decided to acquit the 12 men who spent 19 years in jail in the 7/11 blast case. Also, questions and doubts around the Election Commission's role in India's democracy remain, with the Bihar Special Intensive Review and also with the opposition parties raising questions about voter lists across the country. To talk about all of this, I have with me senior journalist and commentator Sanjay Jha and The Wire's editor Seema Chishti. Thank you both so much for joining me. Let's start with what happened on Monday evening. So in a sudden and surprising move, Jagdeep Dhankhar posted on social media that he had resigned from his position as Vice President of India, effective immediately. While he said this was because he was following medical advice, the way in which his resignation happened, just hours after he had been chairing the Rajya Sabha and had showed no such inclinations, has led to a lot of questions around whether there's some sort of political question in this matter. Now, on the very same day in Parliament, Dhankar had informed members about a notice of motion he had received and accepted seeking the constitution of a committee for the removal of High Court Judge Justice Yashwant Verma, at whose house, as we know, large amounts of cash was allegedly found during a firefighting effort. Now, while addressing the House on a range of issues, including his usual spiel about how all parties should try to be in the House with mutual respect, he showed no signs of an impending resignation. Now, he was Vice President for nearly 3 years. It would have been 3 years next month. And his term has been rather controversial, particularly in relation to the opposition benches. In fact, in December last year, members of the India bloc of parties had put in a no-confidence motion to remove him from office, saying that he would not allow opposition voices to be heard, though the deputy chairman of the Rajya Sabha had dismissed this. But even before he became vice chairman, his role as governor of West Bengal and the frequent clashes with the Trinamool Congress government there had led to questions in the opposition's mind about his constitutional roles. Now, another group that has found themselves at the receiving end of Dhankar's wrath, especially in recent months, is the judiciary. He has made some extremely critical comments about them, including saying that judges are acting like a super parliament without any accountability, and that Article 142, which gives powers to the Supreme Court, is a nuclear missile against democratic forces. Now, one of the things that has caught people's attention over this week is the BJP's silence over Dhankar's resignation. Prime Minister Narendra Modi shared a rather anodyne tweet about the resignation about more than 14 hours after it was first announced, and did not add the kind of flowery praise he usually does when someone steps away from office. Other leaders have barely said anything at all. So I wanted to ask both of you, what is your reading of this situation? Sanjay, if you would begin.
Mr. Dhankar was removed, and the separation, obviously there was a bitter fallout with the Prime Minister. The separation lacked grace because the association didn't have any morality. When I say morality, institutional morality, constitutional morality, and personal morality. Why? People say that the Vice President has been removed. I have questions about that. When Mr. Dhankar says that the opposition, the collective opposition, is trying to destabilize the nation on the floor of the House, does he not disqualify himself as Vice President of India? The entire media is crying about it, that the dignity of the office of the Vice President has been demeaned by the Modi government. Now I have a counter question. Tomorrow, if Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla suffers the same fate, are we going to cry about the Speaker's dignity? He has buried dignity through his performance. Same was the case with the Vice President. The Vice President, so-called Vice President, was acting as the Commander-in-Chief of BJP in Rajya Sabha. The moment Dhankar tried to become the Vice President, BJP sacked him. So the problem with Dhankar was that he was trying to become Vice President, trying to learn the role of the Vice President. But was it possible? He was chosen to be Vice President or not to act as a Vice President only because of his credentials as Bengal Governor. As Bengal Governor, he danced on the debris of propriety. That is the qualification that propelled him to the office of Vice President. And after becoming vice president, he acted as the PR agent of this government. He threatened judiciary, as you said. He threatened opposition. He cared a damn for the constitutional proprieties. So he has now been removed. But there is another aspect. That Dhankar was not the vice president. There was a vacancy for the last 2-3 years. That is a fact. That is a fact. But what is the role of the government? As you said, the Prime Minister's response says everything. We don't have to speculate that he was threatened. He was threatened. If he was not well, the entire BJP's ecosystem, why they are running a campaign against him? Why they are abusing him? Why they are digging up skeletons, what Dhankar did and how he behaved. Some experts are coming on TV and they are saying that Dhankar was doing political activism, legal activism. When he was abusing the opposition and praising the Prime Minister, was that activism? Was that constitutionalism? What was that? But when Dhankar tried to behave like a vice president, then it becomes problematic for this government. And this is not new. This government does not tolerate anybody who has a conscience. I'm asking you, if the president, Draupadi Murmu, tries to find her conscience tomorrow and tries to behave independently, what will be her fate? Dhankar episode has given a message to everybody. And this message was required because people refused to read earlier messages. The earlier messages were given by several incidents. What happened to the CBI chief? In the midnight, Delhi police goes and surrounds the CBI chief office and seals his office. The country should have got the message at that time that we are having a government which is not interested in having a vice president or having a constitutional authority, having a media, having a judiciary. They just want their trusted men and women in all the key positions.
So I look at this, Jahnavi and Sanjay, you're absolutely right, in two parts. One is, of course, the first is the deep institutional degradation that this spotlights. And in a sense, that way it's good because it makes overt things that become tough and abstract to explain. And we must remember this in the context of other very active disappearances of those holding high office, such as Ashok Lavasa being the first EC to suddenly exit after the general election. You had Urjit Patel leaving the RBI suddenly after demonetization. You had Alok Verma, and these are all appointees of this government. They're all people whom this government has appointed. So I think the deep disregard for institutions, and particularly Parliament. Parliament has long now been seen as just a stamping ground. It performs a very important role in theory of checking the executive, or at least providing as a forum of debate. Of course, the BJP has majority, but the opposition must have its say. They were not even allowed to have their say. And other officers, like the way even Harivansh, who's now the deputy, who's now acting as chairman, really effectively, kind of voiced over the agricultural bill, the 3 farm laws, that happened. The way we don't have a deputy leader at all in the Lok Sabha. You just have Mr. Om Birla, who's a speaker. There is no deputy leader, and nobody is able to even tell them that this is the first time, 70 saal mein pehli baar, that this is happening. So I think Dhankar that way presided over further decimating this important democratic institution, and then became a victim of that himself. It almost kind of turned on him. There is another thing, the second part of this is what it tells us about BJP's internal politics, because it was earlier seen that we've now moved into, like a political scientist will tell you, that this is the kind of BJP phase of things. Like there used to be a Congress system, now there's a BJP system. But the inability of the BJP system to absorb even people with the slightest will to demonstrate who they are, or the slightest show of color also becomes very apparent. You had kind of, somebody in fact has analyzed that, somebody in the Economic Times, C.L. Manoj, on how, this entire school of Janata Party socialists, whether it's Satpal Malik or Jagdeep Dhankhar, who probably thought they could find a home in this BJP, also are completely at sea. And they just, if you do not toe the line completely, thou shalt be out. And coming as it does, along with the problems that the BJP is facing in finding a president for itself, which can satisfy what the RSS wants and what the top leadership of the BJP, its top two leaders, the tallest leaders in the BJP, want, also becomes clear as to what is really going on and why that's a problem. So I think maybe in another 4 or 5 years, we will see this moment as marking a very particular moment in understanding what's happening to the BJP in its quest of supreme power and supremacy after having secured just 240 BJP MPs in this Lok Sabha election.
And I want to add something. It's not only about a vice president's office, it's about democracy in India. What is the fate of democracy in India? See, there are questions that he accepted a motion signed by the opposition leader. What was he supposed to do? You know, there are some posts, some particularly constitutional posts like the Lok Sabha Speaker and Vice President of India. They do not work out of personal choices. There are a set of rules and procedures. They have to follow that. If opposition has a petition signed by more than 50 members, the vice president does not have a personal choice. He is duty bound to accept it. And people are saying that angered the government. This government is not a government of niceties. The government has chosen to make bulldozer its mascot. And a government which takes pride in bulldozer being the projective image, why should they worry about who will take the credit and who will not take the credit? The Prime Minister has got the biggest propaganda machine. Whoever files the petition, the Prime Minister could have usurped the credit. So all these things is bogus. The fallout was on fundamental issues. Jagdeep Dhankhar, after the Congress moved a no confidence motion, he tried to balance things. And this government does not like this balancing act. They want institutional and intellectual autonomy to be replaced by personal loyalty.
Now, what you were saying about how there comes a point where in a particular role, it's not about your personal choice. And absolutely that is true if you are following the rules and regulations of the land. But as we have seen in people holding some posts, including Dhankhar as governor of West Bengal, that isn't necessarily the case. It is running as if it were perhaps personal choice and not based on the rules that have been laid down for you. So what do you think changed now?
I think it's a precipitate incident. I mean, this is just guesswork. I have no information. But the conduct of his house, his kind of chairing it with a fair degree of comfort, showing no signs of ill health really at that time. Something's happened in the Business Advisory Committee not being attended by two senior ministers, Mr. Nadda and Mr. Rijiju. I think something late afternoon, there's either been an altercation, a semi-public altercation from where it may have been very difficult to come back, some anger, some show of emotion, perhaps angry words from which there was no coming back, and he was either told to go or things became very bad because the BJP's silence and Mr. Modi's very terse tweet may also suggest that he didn't tell them that he was quitting, because he reaches the Rashtrapati Bhavan at 9 p.m. very dramatically, has a meeting, comes back and he tweets his resignation. So it's also likely that he was all but asked to go. Things became very uncomfortable and then he said, to hell with it, I'm going. So, I mean, that's my hunch. I think some incident precipitated it. I don't know what.
I think they burned the bridges long ago. Dhankhar, the way he was behaving, he was not supposed to speak about farmers' woes. He is telling the government that whatever promises you made to the farmers were not fulfilled. That was the turning point. So, last 3-4 months, I think tension was brewing, and Modi government had decided that this man is not going to do our bidding in Rajya Sabha. And if that was really the case, then Dhankhar could have created a very big crisis for this government. But the government choosing to behave in that rude manner with the Vice President of India, this, we should rather debate institutional crisis. I'm sorry, not institutional crisis, institutional rot. That is the big problem. That will destroy India's image in the global community. It is not only a case of a Vice President or Dhankhar. Dhankhar is going to speak out whatever he has suffered, because Dhankhar is a big player. Dhankhar was nobody when Narendra Modi came to power. But he fixed things in a way that he became Bengal governor. Then he defeated all the aspirants among the BJP and RSS people and became the vice president of India. Such an ambitious person, such a big player, is not going to remain silent. He is going to create problems for this government, and Modi has taken this risk at a very critical time when he is facing internal dissent, when he is facing challenges from the RSS. So I don't think whether he is going to handle the Pandora's box that is going to open or not. I think next month is going to be very crucial.
And I think we will be watching to see whether or not he comes out to say certain
And
things.
there is another point. Who has created a Dhankar? A person who will crush all constitutional niceties, all proprieties, and say that India never saw that kind of progress, what we are seeing under Modi. The BJP created this kind of a person. Now BJP is trying to defame him. The entire ecosystem on social media is defaming him. You know, it reminds me of a Shakil Azmi. He's a Urdu शायर. He says, शहर में जो करता था सांप के कांटे का इलाज, शहर में जो करता था सांप के कांटे का इलाज, उसके तहखानों से सांपों के ठिकाने निकले.
Okay, on that note, I think we can move on to the next topic of our discussion, which is that earlier this week, the Bombay High Court has acquitted 12 men who had earlier been convicted and 5 of them even sentenced to death in the case pertaining to the July 11, 2006 serial train blasts in Mumbai that killed 189 people and injured more than 800. Now, these men had spent the last 19 years in jail, except for one who had passed away in custody in 2001. One other person had been acquitted in the case in 2015. Now, the High Court judgment found that the confessional statements were not truthful, the ones recorded by the police, and several of them were also identical to each other, showing that perhaps they had been fabricated. The bench also noted that the defense had been able to establish that the men were tortured, and the confessions were extracted using these methods. Now, throughout the trial, the accused, their lawyers, and medical evidence had all pointed towards prolonged torture, both in police custody and in jail. 3 days after the High Court order, the Supreme Court stepped in to say that this Bombay High Court judgment should not be used as precedent in the future because it might hamper cases being fought under the same law, but also said that it would not interfere with the court's verdict acquitting these men. Now, the investigations conducted by Maharashtra's anti-terror squad, which was handed this case, have come under serious question during the whole duration of the trial, but even more so now that the judgment has come. Not only did 12 men spend 19 years in jail, also those who lost their loved ones in the crime that took place in 2006 may have been denied justice because the police was focusing on building this case using fraudulent means. But the judgment has not mentioned any action that should be taken against the policemen that had been involved in this torture and perhaps in fabricating evidence. And nor has it said that these 12 men who were imprisoned should be given any sort of compensation. Now, in a situation like this, what should happen next? As citizens, what does this mean for us?
So in a sense, it's a good thing they've got their freedom, better late than never. So for all, a significant part of their lives, 19 years, without bail, parole of any sort. They stayed in jail through COVID.
Some had only left for a few hours.
So things, so very strict laws were made to bear upon them. And this is, of course, the torture that they had to undergo and to do these confessions. All this kind of bodes really poorly for any faith that we may have in the judicial system. And more than the judicial system, because the judiciary has actually said they're innocent, however late, is in the prosecution. After all, to what extent will people go to get a conviction? To what extent you will push a theory, the pressure cooker theory in this case, that this is how these bombs kind of happened to explode, is really worrying. There have been this series of laws that India has seen. You had POTA, you had TADA, and now you have MACOCA, and also maybe even UAPA kind of falls in that. This sort of, which inverts the presumption of innocence principle, the basis of what the Indian judicial system should rest on, that I'm innocent till I'm proven guilty. And I think all these laws at every time, and we've had to repeal all these because it's almost as if India kind of waits till there's sufficient amount of evidence builds up about how unjust this whole system is and then decides to repeal it. So I think MACOCA will probably go the same way. Mr. Tushar Mehta argued in the Supreme Court, he almost pleaded with the Supreme Court to somehow just ensure that this is this is not a precedent. This is a recent trend in, I think, Indian judicial decisions. This happened in the case of two women who were given bail and acquitted. I think Narwal was acquitted and Devangna were acquitted in the riots case. But again, the court is made to say the next day that this is not a precedent. So everything is made an exception. Even in the BKC things, you're let out because you're sick. It's not as if there's something basically, fundamentally, principally wrong, which can be used as precedent to take care of thousands of under trials, people who are languishing in jail, some for well after even if they were to be held guilty, if they were to serve that term, that's also over their languishing in jails. So I think this is a much larger question. India, its citizens, as you mentioned, and all of us who are watching this have to ask. And so it's even not about just this law, but this whole business that you assume that a certain demographic, certain people will be assumed guilty, and we will go down all the way, destroy their lives, and then, of course, there comes a good judgment, and we're grateful for that they're set free, but at what cost? And as you said, the 189 people who lost their lives in that heinous terror attack, plus these lives, so the loss just keeps mounting, and nobody is served justice, and also India is not safer. How is India safer if we go after the wrong people, and those who have conducted the blast are roaming free and laughing in some corner? So I think all this raises serious questions about humanity, democracy, rights, and our judicial system and policing.
Yeah, around the questions of policing, our colleague Sukanya Shanta had done this report last month before the judgment, speaking to the families of some of these men who were incarcerated, and how police were visiting them regularly and still asking them questions despite these men having been in jail, and including questions like, where is he? I mean, he's in
your custody.
So it was really a very confusing and evident form of harassment. Sanjay Ji, if you would like to...
See, Seema Ji rightly said about the draconian laws we have made. And what is the conviction rate of UAPA? Less than 3%. Every episode these days point to a larger, deeper crisis. Crisis in judiciary, crisis in investigative system, crisis in public perception. If somebody is a Muslim, he's in jail, no issue. If somebody is a critic of the government, he's in... Now, has the civil society ever asked why Omar Khalid is in jail for so many years? Why the hearing has not started? Why Sanjay Bhatt is in jail for so many years? 7 years. Why should somebody... And the Supreme Court says, we are not going to hear on his bail petition. His wife is crying for justice publicly. What has the civil society done? What has the higher judiciary done? They do not do any introspection. Even in this case, as you said, that questions were similar, answers were similar. That means the investigation was a fraud. What should the common people do? There is a philosophical flaw in our governance paradigm these days. The purpose of our democracy was, our democracy rests on Gandhian tolerance. The purpose was empowerment of people. What we are seeing is harassment, curbing freedoms of people. That is not our democracy. Our democracy is empowerment of people. You have to create laws for safeguards of citizens, not to make citizens more vulnerable. So I think now both the political class and the civil society must think about the kind of India we want to have. There is a crisis here.
Yeah, thank you. I think, well, as you said, it is definitely a relief that these men have been released and acquitted, and hopefully are in some way able to rebuild their lives, even though they have spent the last 19 years in extremely harsh conditions. Moving on to the third topic of our discussion today, which is questions and concerns that remain and continue to be raised around the Election Commission and its role in India's democracy today. Now, just yesterday, outside of Parliament, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi said that his party has done some investigations into the 2024 general elections in Karnataka in one particular seat, and found that just in that seat, thousands of voters above the age of 18 were suddenly added to the electoral rolls. And this was done through some sort of fraudulent measures. He also said that the EC and its officials should not think that they can get away with doing things like this. This is similar to the kinds of allegations that the Congress had earlier raised about what happened in Maharashtra. Now, the EC has responded by saying that these allegations are baseless, and also asked why it took Gandhi to come out took so long to come out with this, given that the Congress hasn't complained to any of the electoral officers in Karnataka about any such wrongdoing. Now, meanwhile, members of the India Alliance have also been protesting outside Parliament about the special intensive review of electoral rolls in Bihar. This is something we have been watching for the last 1 month. And today is supposed to be, in fact, the last day for people to submit their forms under this revision, though they can apparently submit their documents later as well, if they want to be included in Bihar's electoral rolls, and elections are likely to be held around November in the state. Now, in its release yesterday, the EC said that more than 60 lakh voters would now be omitted from the previous rolls because they have reportedly either died or migrated or were registered in more than one place. Now, opposition parties and activists and researchers on the ground have been raising very serious questions about the process and how it's taking place in Bihar, and also what this means on the national level, since the notice for it was a national one. They've even said that this is a form of vote bandi to try and stop people from casting their vote. And opposition parties have said that they're considering even boycotting the November elections if things continue in this way. Now, instead of answering these questions head on and trying to assuage people about the democracy of the country and the way it's functioning, the EC has been sending WhatsApp messages and not issuing releases on its website to very select journalists, in which it's asking questions like, oh, should the Election Commission be afraid? Should we allow deceased voters to be on the list? Now, I want to ask both of you, are the opposition questions to the Election Commission fair? Or do you think the EC is right in saying that it is merely trying to clean up the system?
Whether the opposition is fair or not, whether the allegations are legitimate or not, is not the question. The question is, what is the role of the Election Commission? Why has Election Commission adopted an antagonistic role towards the opposition? They are not the spokesperson of this government.
I mean, in this situation, even
There's a touch of Dhankhar here, if I may say so. This whole, please.
Her intervention is welcome because she reminded me of Dhankhar. Now, again, if Gyanesh Kumar is removed tomorrow, he is given an unceremonious exit, all of us will say, what happens to the dignity of Election Commission? Where is the dignity? The Election Commission, if it starts working like a department of the government, you get jokes on the social media that Election Commission is not joined the BJP, it is giving support from outside. That kind of joke. Now, if large number of opposition parties say it is vote bandi, what is the response of the Election Commission? To give anonymous responses through WhatsApp? No, they should call all the opposition party and address their concerns to their satisfaction. There has to be live communication with the opposition party. But again, the Chief Election Commissioner is behaving like a commander-in-chief of the BJP. Is that the kind of democracy we want? And now, in the society, the terror was created by ED. Now, EC has become another source of terror. People are scared. Some people is in America, some people is in Amritsar, some people is in Mumbai. Crores of Biharis go out, and then suddenly they find that they have to return home. Why? Because their name has been struck, or there is a threat that name will be struck out because the Election Commission has done something out of the blue. What was the Election Commission doing 1 year or 2 years ago? Why this 1 month time? Nobody has any problem with intensive revision. What is the fraud you are doing? There are visual evidence, some YouTube channels have shown that nobody is filling up the form. At mass level, thousands of forms are being filled up by the BO. There are fake signatures. What is the legal validity of that submission? And the Election Commission is saying, what is the problem if we want to rectify the electoral rules? Nobody has any problem with a clean voters list. But the process has to be clean. Intent has to be clean. The Election Commission should come out, talk to the nation, talk to the citizens, talk to the political parties, instead of hiding in some corner and then they are just firing away. This is not the role of the Election Commission.
I think what you said about the questions around the process, of course, that has been very much a part of this from the very beginning, particularly the timing, 1 month to do this exercise involving close to 8 crore people and people who may not have the right documentation, demanding documents that go above and beyond what is usually required to be registered as a voter. And then also the speed with which BLOs are having to do this, leading to them having to do things like fill the forms themselves, uploading forms without the right documents, taking Aadhaar cards when the EC has said that that is not a valid document just because it's all people have. That's all very much been a part of this. But I thought it was interesting when you said that the Election Commission should not act as it's antagonistic to the opposition party. Now, this is not an allegation that's new. We've seen it in previous elections, particularly, when complaints are made against what different leaders are doing, and the way it reacts to complaints against the opposition has been quite different from complaints against the ruling party. But in this particular situation, it also seems like it is antagonistic to the people who are finding themselves in a situation of chaos if they just want to exercise their right to vote in elections that are not so far away.
I think this is a very significant step again, as you said, this kind of antagonism to political parties, and as you said, to now the electorate. You've turned against the electorate. The business of striking my name off the rolls is a very serious business. It's even more serious than enrolling someone. To think that it can be done casually by an authority, which is the Election Commission, which is not authorized by law and constitution to decide citizenship. In fact, the government of India, the state of India, has no document, only those who get registered. In fact, for example, those Bangladeshi citizens, I think there are about 900 odd Bangladeshi citizens who in 2015 chose to become Indian citizens because of the India-Bangladesh land agreement done by Mr. Modi's government then. They will get a registration, or if you marry an Indian or something. People who are born in India, there is no document that the government of India says is a citizenship document. Perhaps a passport, because it allows you to go outside and there you're known as an Indian, but that's by inference only.
Majority of people do not have passport.
Yeah, and that majority, I mean, in Bihar particularly, so that's crazy. But when there is no ruling on exactly what a citizenship document is, how can you sort of land in the middle of Bihar and do this? But what's dangerous is, and this is where we should not lose the thread, this is not only about impracticality and the lack of pragmatism in Bihar. The EC may want it to become, it's just rushed and, BLOs are, internet is slow, etc. This entire business of what the EC is planning to launch nationwide is flawed, wrong, and unconstitutional. And I hope the Supreme Court, when it hears it, pays heed to that by saying that, just striking off documents, saying this is not valid, that is not valid, and in their affidavit to the government, to the Supreme Court, to say that we're not using Aadhaar, ration card, etc., because they're not a proof of citizenship. Is the FRA a proof of citizenship? A proof of citizenship? Is a matriculation certificate a proof of citizenship? So what are you moving to? You're moving to a situation when you'll actually fundamentally destroy universal adult franchise. And if you, by stealth, make it that if you have a matric certificate, then you're on. What are you doing? You're damaging a basic principle of universal adult franchise, which India has done. And unfortunately, what the Election Commission is trying to do is not very unique. This has been tried against the blacks in the previous century, even earlier parts of this in the 20th century, when you don't say that we don't want blacks to vote, but you use all other markers which push out those who are deprived, on the margins, and poor, or of the wrong skin color. So this kind of an attempt is like a really ham and a very sudden and a sort of a very sledgehammer-like effect of just turning back from the basic promise of Indian democracy in 1950. And I hope the Election Commission has asked very serious questions and this entire SIR is rolled back. And one more thing, they keep talking about how the 2003 electoral roll is sacrosanct, and they say that, a big special intensive revision was done in 2003. Why isn't that notification being rolled out? It is not available. No one has seen it, or no one remembers it, because the entire phrase of special intensive revision does not exist in the Election Commission's own manuals. And currently, in the rules it has suddenly devised on the 24th of June, it has actually upturned its own rules. It accepted Aadhaar cards. It went through this whole business of linking Aadhaar cards to ECs, making it seem so important. And in fact, a lot of others were ranged against it now, who are now arguing for Aadhaar to be accepted. So what's going on? By just creating a hangama, making people panicky, saying all these things, an attempt is being made to knock off a certain vulnerable section of Bihar, which will perhaps not be seen as politically inclined to the ruling establishment. In fact, on the wire, we have a Bihar vulnerability index we've tried to compute, that given all these rules that the Election Commission has put out, where do the people who are most likely to be affected by this disenfranchisement, where do they live, and what is their political like state, if you like. So it's very disturbing, and it behoves, in fact, in Government of India is scoring a self-goal when it does this. Its entire claim of a vibrant democracy, it's out and it's in G this and G that and Global South, etc., is because it boasts of being the biggest democracy. If at the Election Commission, at the heart of this very proud legacy that we bear as Indians, is compromised, then its own existence is compromised. And if these election rolls are so flawed and false, how did it elect a supremely good government just a year ago? So what's going on? What about those foreigners who elected this Modi government? So the whole thing is like eminently farcical, and it would be funny if it wasn't so serious and so absolutely damning to us as a society and country.
But I also see a dramatic improvement in the conduct of Election Commission, and I want to praise Election Commission for that. Earlier, we used to get responses through C-grade couplets. Now we are getting messages through anonymous WhatsApp messages. That's a dramatic improvement.
Yeah, I think kudos on that.
Okay, I think that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. Thank you both so much for joining me, and thank you all for watching.